Hello, Bernd. How are you? All the
I'm
way
fine.
from Frankfurt, I suppose, this time around.
Indeed. Sometimes in Brussels, sometimes in Amsterdam, sometimes in Frankfurt, and sometimes even home at the Baltic Sea. So
At the Baltic Sea. That's so you consider yourself as being a world traveler in a European scale.
absolutely.
Ish.
So it's quite interesting to work really in different cultures and with different peoples and different styles of leadership. So it's
Absolutely,
really making it interesting.
absolutely. And yeah, last time we met, this was in Brussels. And then I spoke to you about the RegTech book, and you were extremely eager to be in the book. Because you have to explain us a bit more, because the first thing you said, but couldn't have been developing a regulatory maturity model. So enlighten us, what does that mean?
Indeed, actually, even way before this whole RegTech wave and the coining of the term came up, I was working in my previous life as a consultant, obviously, in many spaces around how to take out cost, how to optimize regulatory management, regulatory change, and regulatory run within a given financial institution.
Mm-hmm.
If you do the math around how much cost that bears, from KYC, AML, regulatory reporting, and all the imposed changes that come through regulatory changes and new directives, then there you can see that this is a tremendous effort that institutions need to bear and have bared since the financial crisis. Mm-hmm. And it will not get less, it will get more. So my feeling was there must be a way how to structurally look at this really from start to finish and to manage these type of change engagements and run engagements in a much proper and better way. And I thought about, can I give this I was thinking about the CMMI model, the capability maturity model, and just we're applying it basically to regulatory. So here we go, and looking at organizations, how they behave, to give them some self-reflection where they are today and where they actually in the future should be, to actually get spend less, be quicker, and actually coin an advantage out of that.
Mm-hmm. In your model, you got 5 steps. So going from ad hoc, fragmented, managed, integrated, and agile. Where do you see the vast majority of companies today?
Well, obviously, if I'm brutally honest, I think it's best for each firm to self-reflect. Most of them would probably say somewhere between fragmented and integrated. But I still see even today a lot of firms, especially in the tier 3, 4, 5 space, more in the ad hoc space, being as an example, real life example, really witnessed. Talking about a new regulation with a firm, and it says, I haven't heard of this. Is this really relevant for us? And pointing to a colleague, Mr. Müller, can you read through this and give us by next week an indication if this is really for us, impacting us, and how and what and why. So this is ad hoc, basically. I didn't see this coming, and now I need to deal with it, right? And this is something that very often happens even in larger organization, depending on the complexity of the organization, and obviously the way how you actually observe the market.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you give an example with ad hoc. So would you mind to walk us through from ad hoc to agile? How would you describe the journey?
Well, it's let's say this way. So the ad hoc, I just gave an example. The integrated is, let's think you are a more complex organization. You have multiple business lines, being so, for example, you have corporate banking, a capital or financial markets type of organization, potentially private banking, and you today organize regulatory change by these silos independently, potentially sometimes where, for example, let's take MiFID II as an example. You understood very early on that this needs to be managed across these silos. So that's, you could say, first indications of that you look at it from across the different silos. But yet, potentially you're not yet have run the bank capability, so you have something specific KYC for private bank because you believe it's very different doing onboarding and handholding in the private bank area as you would do it obviously in retail banking. So for example, in the run the bank space, thereby you would still have fragmented solutions and so on. If you go then further down from left to right, so left being the ad hoc and right being, let's say, the agile way of working, and being very agile in terms of responding to any given new way of regulation that comes up, then you make more use of technology to respond and to be more better suited and speedier and quicker to absorb any given regulation, to the point where when you're in agile, you actually are able to determine and to create value out of regulation in terms of that you are actually can build a competitive advantage out of that and gain market share. An example, easy example, people ask me, well, can you give me an example where this is really true? There was, if you remember, some years ago, tax regulation around FATCA, where
never heard about it.
Never heard of that. Exactly.
I'll ask Mr. Muller to have a look.
Exactly. Have a look at it. But so many banks back then chosen to say, oh, this is complicated, and you know what? We have just offboard U.S. citizens from our bank. And another bank that I've worked with said, this is great. This is an opportunity. We can use this and actually gain market share by giving them a home. We will comply to FATCA, and we will have a fantastic solution that will be and put us into place to actually respond properly to that and onboard these clients and vacuum clean the market.
Yeah, and I think that's actually the Valhalla of RegTech. I think you described that very well. I think it's something that we all admire too, that we can turn regulations into a competitive advantage. So I think you also mentioned towards the end of your article something that also struck me when I was reading it was around the old culture, as you described, being the store now and look at it later, as where the new culture you mentioned, this real-time handling of data. This comes very close with what you just said, right? So for your opinion, this is also within the agile arena, I would suppose?
Yeah, indeed. So basically, as an example, with what we see, there's it started in the payments arena with moving to real time. You saw the first drives in the UK, obviously, with faster payments. We see that now also with the mainland of Europe. Instant payments, and we see all other, let's say, payments regions across the world looking at that as well. What does that mean in reality? It means that we are more and more moving towards a real-time economy because enabling the ability to move funds in real time obviously also enables us for a different way how we look at loans, how we look at interest rates, how we look at the risk that we need to manage alongside with this. So, and this obviously drives complexity in terms of how you deal with things like anti-money laundering and associated processes. So another thing, this is the second level of that drives really complexity. So real time is one, obviously, you need to respond much quicker. And to take decisions whether you let a payment pass through or you block it or you at least park it. And the second one is the information richness that a transaction is being accompanied with. In the past, obviously, you know, coming back from the old SWIFT world, where an empty message had a certain number of bytes that you would need to scan through for keywords and so on, for blacklists and so on. That will increase in the future. So because I can add PDF documents, I can add even potentially video proof and so on. And that's additional documentation. If it's accompanied by a transaction, I need to validate, I need to look through. That means the complexity increases, the speed increases. Thereby, I need to find new solutions or new ways how to deal with this new regime.
No, absolutely. That's something that I also hear when I hear you speak, and I particularly like that actually, which is you keep, I don't know if whether this is deliberately or not, but you keep the word industry very wide. Do you see RegTech as being something that is only applicable in the financial industry or not at all?
Totally not. I mean, think of it like what we see currently in the macroeconomic and the political arena. where we had a wave in the 2000s where we tried to create more treaties working together, zones of trade and so on. What we see now is, of course, let's say a little change from that. And if we go further now, then I think we will see that corporates that want to do business in certain regions also need to think about and ring fence basically how they actually operate in terms of payments, in terms of business deals, in terms of transactions. And that means that actually the regulatory regime in terms of, for example, managing AML could also be something that is very interesting also for corporate. So I really think that companies, firms, financial institutions could also potentially expand their traditional financial services offering, banking services, also in the regulatory space to cover these type of companies. Another example, very easy and obvious example is banks have a very good, lots of banks have a very good reputation and a capability around managing risk and AML and so on, and have invested heavily in these type of architectures and infrastructures. That kind of capability can also be brought towards service to startups, to fintechs that are not able to actually invest into this space. Lots of startups and fintechs obviously at some moment in time have a payment component that needs to be is part of their service, be it it's part of their integral value chain or they use someone else for that. But if it's part of their value chain, AML comes to play. And that's, if you want to invest heavily in that, I think that doesn't make any sense. That's a service you could consume basically using an incumbent bank where banks and fintechs could work together. And that could also be an interesting case, obviously, for the banks itself, to acquire a customer segment, startups, fintechs,
absolutely.
Customers itself.
It's turning the way upside down on it. I think it's bringing it into a collaborative space where there are links from both or from several directions. I kind of like also that it's something that I've been saying myself also and many others in the market, but it's about how we always believed. We started off being very local as a humanity, then we globalized. And now I feel much more and more that you're combining both. And we tend to use it to name it in the book as being global. Because you have a global reach, but a local flavor.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is happening in very different shapes and forms. So I think that's interesting. Last time when we spoke, Bernd, I'm talking about something global here, because I know you've been highly connected in a lot of spaces. You also mentioned that you had some joy to be connected and to work and to speak with the MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, because I think they take a very important role as being the regulator taking the lead. How do you look at that?
I think if you look at the different regulatory regimes around the world in terms of how they play their role, how they inform themselves around staying in the loop around new technology developments, and actually creating also a body, a catalyst to help market organizations to come together for the better, for the greater good, to share innovation, to share the burden, and to share cost and so on. I think that's a role model I think that many other regulators can learn from. Obviously, now everyone would say, Singapore is small and, that's not that complicated, not too many banks there. And it's, an overseeable area. But again, it can be used as a role model to learn from. There's a lot of things that I see in my past talking to regulators. The learning curve of regulators in terms of to stay in touch and to see all the different changes that are happening, imposed by technology in terms of macro as well as macroeconomics and so on. There's a lot of stuff to do and a lot of stuff to really grasp. I think a collaborative model working together with companies to achieve that in a joint way, how like MAS is doing it, is a great way forward to really share the cost, share the burden, and make the best out of the situation for everyone.
So that means on our next book or second edition, you will come not with a regulatory maturity model, but a regulation maturity model. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, the regulator maturity model.
Exactly.
Indeed.
In other words, subtact, right?
Yeah, exactly. Good idea. I will have to think about that.
Yeah, indeed. Bernd, and I mean, I see you're a very passionate person. You're very much into this, and it feels like you're in it for the better of the industry. But what keeps you awake at night?
What keeps me awake at night is is ideas that come to mind through my work, and I need to bring them somewhere. So I need to offload the idea, the energy somewhere, and I do this in thinking about these type of models, how to make things better, how to squeeze time, and how to avoid basically mistakes by that. And there's an innovative approach to that. There's also a lot of common sense about that. So at the end of the day, is it all black magic? It's not. It's just thinking about a little bit harder around this, testing out different scenarios, outcomes, and 2 or 3 of them might make sense. If they happen tomorrow? Probably not. It'll take more time because we live in a complex environment. So you need to get a lot of people on board to think the same way, and then never forget politics on top of things. But at the end of the day, I try in reality to work on exactly that. That makes me tick. I learn every day something new, and with that I build on the next thing and on the next thing.
No, that I think it's a very nice way of going through life, actually. Yeah, a last question I'd like to ask, because it's part of the book, it's part of collaboration, it's how we deal with RegTech, but why people should contact you? What's the reason, and what can you help them with?
Well, if they want to drink a coffee, I'm already up for it. So
that's very startup, right?
I love coffee. But other than that, if they have an idea and want to be challenged on that, that's something that I obviously like to do. And developing new ideas, or if they need a spin on something specific that they don't get any further, or want to have a second opinion, outside-in opinion on something, this is where you want to contact me. Other than that, I help companies to innovate, help corporates to innovate, help to build ventures, and that's basically what I do. Help live out my creativity and help others with that.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I hope through this message you'll get a lot of people that come to you, and a lot of people can enjoy your insights. So, Bernd, thank you very much for all these nice words and these insights that you gave us, not only to this interview but also to the article. So I'm sure that a lot of people again will come to you. So thank you very much, and I hope to see a lot more of you. And potentially now we know there's going to be a supervisory maturity model coming, and at least we have a good plan for the next book.
Absolutely. Thank you, Koen.
You're welcome. For the listeners, don't hesitate to stay just for a little bit longer, because you will get a message now with our website address. So feel free to come and have a look.